Any kind of traumatic event needs to be talked about. Being in such a large bushfire is a somewhat life-threatening existential fear experience. The trauma of seeing what you love destroyed can have some significant impacts.
Things are really starting to pick up now. Home sweet home.
People who live remotely often don't have too many avenues of talking to people from outside. Their underlying thing is their love, that place they live in. And to see it destroyed means much more than just the traumatic event of a fire. Human relationships are so important, and I guess we all know that in human relationships, being heard and listened to is also very important. Narrative therapy, it's telling your story and how that helps psychologically.
What I saw was red, and it was called red. Red. I think it was Sunday come through. It was very eerie, very eerie.
5 o'clock, Sunday. Yeah, and this is our hill right in front of us.
On that Sunday, it was a very hot day.
A dangerous situation for us all. 40 degrees and windy.
We had all that dry lightning, so there was a fire just behind the campground. There was a fire just out on that hill, which is like a kilometre away.
It's not just one or two fires, it's lots of fires.
The night we had the lightning strike, I think there were 21 fires started.
We had a lot going on. By this time, this fire had burnt about 25,000 hectares. So you have a fire that in Goongarra that was burning, that had burnt nearly 75,000 by this stage. We got one burnt nearly 20,000 in 5 hours.
We knew it didn't get put out, and we knew when it joined another fire, and then it joined another fire, and it was relentlessly coming.
The first two I saw go up, within 3 to 5 minutes they were crown fires. So the fire situation was ideal for them. It just sort of exploded, you say.
It was the force of an atomic bomb. When it hit here, the fire spiral was something like 14 kilometres into the sky. That is red, orange glow, 14k up.
We could see and smell the smoke.
At night we're going to sleep, and I remember looking out my window while I was in bed and just seeing kind of behind the hill, it was kind of all red and glowing. Still fires about.
Just this eerie red glow all around us.
It was like warfare in a way, and just so unpredictable. You didn't know what was going to happen.
And then all of a sudden it was just here.
And I looked over at the fire boiling up behind our mountain range out here, and I thought, yes, I'll leave.
The intensity of the fire, the speed of it, the fact that several fires joined.
Every direction there were fires here.
And I distinctly remember the sound.
When it starts to crown, when the fire goes to the top of the trees, it'll sound like a big jet coming.
February the 9th, it was like there were 2 or 3 freight trains about to come flying over the hill. It's incredibly noisy.
It was so loud. Incredible.
It's quite surreal, actually. It's like the apocalypse is happening, which it is if you're close to it.
Unstoppable wind
A hot,
gusts
long
fan the
summer
flames,
promised a
spreading
day like
fires
this,
across the state.
and when it finally arrived, nothing in the path of the fire stood a chance.
It was sad, it was devastating. I just cried, of course.
Feel all the burnt trees.
Yeah, that first drive home was shocking. You didn't know where you were. Everything was, big stretches of the road home were all burnt.
I remember coming home and then going into my new bedroom and looking out the window, and the whole of the side of the hill was black. The grass was all burnt, so that was really shocking to see.
Coming up that road that I knew, and like through the Martins Creek bit, that was home, that was my place, and it was completely gone and different, and I obviously couldn't cope with that. Yeah, home, gone.
So when you have a fire and you lose houses and people leave, that has a huge effect as to whether a community is going to be resilient and sustainable for the future.
We're dwindling populations, and we can't afford to lose any houses or any more people.
There's a critical mass with populations, I assume, and this is not just some little country town. We're spread out over, many acres.
Keeping the school going is one of the main things. We just haven't got enough kids to populate the area to do it.
Tub at Goongarra School, it's back to 5 kids.
Yeah, the school's only run here 2 days a week. It's done as a campus from Goongarra 3 days a week, and then they show it here 2 days, Thursdays and Fridays.
Lately it's been taking about 2 hours to get there and 2 hours to get back.
You don't get all your sort of town conveniences.
At the moment we have virtually no mobile communications.
All facilities, all the things that you take for granted, forget it.
It's very tough, and not everyone would handle it.
Nature's always on your back out here. If it's not fires, it's floods. If it's not floods, it's pest animals coming in and ripping your house apart.
We live in one of the most fire-prone places in the world. So if you live in rural communities in Gippsland, you're going to see bushfire.
When most people live in rural areas, you kind of have a bit of a rough fire plan of, if this does happen, this is what I'm going to do.
You leave or you stay. And if you stay, you're generally going to save shit. If you leave, you come back to shit. So the idea is to damp down and fight it, and then have a full back position.
We'd done a lot of watering, and I had a sprinkler system going around the house.
Knowing that I have a good water supply, it was enough that I could reach all around the house, and if I needed to, I got my fire shelter that I could just disappear into, and everything was going to be fine.
We decided that our kids should not be here because it's obviously
It just became obvious that it wasn't going to go away.
Really stressful, and it wasn't going to change quickly. But then you're quite invested where you live, and if you've got, like all your dreams, your business, or your operation and whatever going on, to walk away from it and to surrender it to what will be is pretty hard to do as well.
For people that don't feel that they can, that they're up to it, they need to go. It's not. There's no stigma about it. It's not. You don't get a medal for putting yourself through that sort of trauma.
I want to defend next time because unfortunately we couldn't get in, And for 3 weeks, and our property slowly burnt to the ground. We still felt it burning when we got there. It was that we know that if we could have got in earlier, we could have saved our sheds and our houses and our other bits and pieces.
People wanted to come in a few days before to protect their own homes. They weren't allowed. And that, in reality, put more load on the people that did decide to stay.
There was a disconnect between the authority saying you can't go somewhere and locals wanting to go somewhere. So when we went to Bonang, we were told we're not allowed to go. I'm going, it's a public bloody road, we're going.
I think the hardest bit was the road being cut off. And so my wife was in Orbost. I didn't see her for about 4 months.
I've got a younger son in Bombala and he wanted to come home and help his father. And he got to Delegate River, they had a roadblock up. And the roadblock, you can't go through. He said, but I've got to go home. He said, my parents want me.
You got some of the best bushmen in the area, and the local copper was saying you can't go in and help them. You know, those sort of things are the real ridiculous things as far as I'm concerned.
That is not a law that has any rightful substance. To tell me I can't come home to protect my family or my animals, I'll drive right through it.
Animal welfare was last on the list, yet me as a responsible farmer, if I don't look after the animals, I'll be the first one to get fined.
It's a dysfunctional system and we're paying for it, but unfortunately, like anything, what choice do I have?
Absolute despair that we could not influence what was going on.
It started to feel a little bit strange for the residents here that during the day there'd be a massive influx of government types that would come and light fires, but then at 5 o'clock they'd all leave and we'd all still be here.
The interesting thing is too is when the fire came on the Sunday, the department just left and they didn't even say anything, didn't contact anybody, didn't say anything. They were up at the hall and they just took off. We didn't even know.
The main fire, a bloke come in and said, oh God, thank God you're packing up, we're going. And the fire brigade went before me. And, you know, that to me just didn't make any sense. They just left you. And they wouldn't even let your mates come in to help you, so...
You can't do it by yourself in a situation like that. You really need backup, you know, you need someone around.
I nearly killed myself. I've got a buggy over there and I had to lift that onto the back of the ute on my own. That nearly brought me undone.
All the vehicles are gone. And that's when I started asking questions, and then Helen heard something on the radio, and that's when we knew that everybody has gone to bloody Delegate because it was too dangerous.
People, they come and say, oh yeah, we'll look after you, don't worry, yeah, you'll be okay. We're going now, but we'll go. You just stay here. If you're cooked, don't worry. Because they just kept me believing that they were going to do something. That was the scariest part for me.
I don't know, it's hard to describe. You feel anger and disappointment, and you feel let down, you feel that nobody cares, and you ask yourself, what were they here for? What were they doing? They should have stayed away. At least we would have had no confusion, no
false sense of security.
False sense of security.
We had to make some pretty hard calls and some pretty decisive calls at times about where we'd go with our equipment and our people to fight those fires. So, yeah, it was very, very busy.
A lot of people forgot that just before the fires, there were a lot of fires on the other side of the state. So a lot of resources were over there. And I think, you know, there were people that expected to have a truck in their front yard. And I think if we choose to live out here and be here, we have to take responsibility. There will never be a fire truck in your front yard. We don't have the resources.
Yeah, there were a lot of people out there doing stuff.
Yeah.
But for someone to actually come and try and relieve your stress or help you get through it, I think it's almost up to the individual. We had our support, unless someone was going to stay with you the whole time, which is a big ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no golden pill to get through that.
Many people's true colours became visible, and there was many great colours, I must say. Everyone all the locals that did remain, and especially crews that came from New Zealand. There is a patch on the wall there, the New Zealand Rural Fire Brigade. They passed out a few patches to some of us locals.
I was rather overwhelmed by the support that we got out here from fire crews all around Victoria and even New Zealand.
And it was really surprising that there was a, DELP had a staging area here. I learnt many years ago that, living out here, you've got to accept the responsibility of where you live.
As far as I'm concerned, if you live out in the bush, you're your own fire chief and you've got to have your own equipment and your own ways of coping with it. You can't rely on anyone else.
It's not unusual around here for people to wear lots of hats. They're in the SES and they're in the CFA and they might be in the CWA or in the school council.
Pretty much everyone in the valley is in the CFA. So with such a small community, you have to tag team who can get in. Well, you have to share the roles, but unfortunately, there's not really enough people to share those roles so that everyone's getting rest.
We are volunteers. All these trucks and that over a period of time, and they look shiny and red and all this kind of stuff, and they go down the street and they do all the things and everything, but none of them get paid.
We got a couple of trucks, and we go in on fires, but at the end of it, put the real resources in. And generally speaking, they put resources in and they put fires out. This one, they decided not to, and it sort of blew up on them.
A lot of these other areas, they were burnt by the department, not by the bushfire. There was a few good ones in there making sensible decisions, trying to do the best they could, but my God, so many were just driving around, lighting up fires, bulldozing trees. There was one incident where it was just, one of my favourite trees on a walk up the hill here. It just had a little bit of fire around some bracken in the bottom, and I thought, I'll put that out. We had the CFA truck there. And I said, we can give that a squirt, that'll be right. Hey, Mac, come down here with the bulldozer when you're finished up there. There's another tree to push over. And I was like, who makes these decisions and why?
For me, it was just you just had this massive destruction of, 100,000 hectares of forest, and then there was just this continued management of tree removal and look, there's a dangerous tree where no one's ever going to go, let's cut it down. And it was just this constant habitat destruction after the fire. So you thought the fire was like this destructive force of nature, and you coped with that. It was all right, it's done, it will, it's starting to come back. But then this constant for weeks and weeks and months of all this management, which destroyed more environment. And you're just like, oh, when does it end?
We have said that this is a place worthy of conserving, and we've allowed it to be devastated. Now let's try and keep an eye on it after this.
I know this bush quite well, and the environment means a lot to me. So to see such a transformation is quite, it's quite heart-rendering.
In a rainforest environment, every time they burn, you can see that the gullies get drier and drier, and it doesn't matter how many university degrees you've got. I think they've got to be pretty careful with that.
Seeing the destruction, the added destruction as well as the fire, nature's adapted to cope with bushfires. It's not adapted to cope with chainsaws, bulldozers, fire on top of fire. Wildlife refuges getting burnt out just because it didn't burn. It's like bombing a refugee camp and saying, well, we've got to bomb it so it doesn't get bombed.
Those little green zones are the areas that vegetation and fauna are going to come out from to colonise the areas eventually after a fire. I could cope with the fact that areas were burnt, but the extra management affected me. Like it was like that was sort of just the straw that broke the camel's back.
I think quite often they negate the amount of what locals can provide, but it's awkward integrating independent, free-thinking locals with larger the requirements of those larger organisations.
Once again, we're all local community members, so the contractors working for us are from the community, our staff are from the community. But in saying that, fires we quite often have internationals help us. The fires here in 2014, we had people from New Zealand come across the ditch to give us a hand. We also had firefighters from right across the country here, so it's a big team effort. And at times that can be a really big team. Like I know in 2014 that was about 700 people in the Orbost and surrounding communities working on the fires.
When other CFA crews or department or whatever would come out, then Goongerah CFA, someone would always take them around because they knew all the tracks, they knew all that stuff. That is really, really important, local knowledge.
Local knowledge is pretty critical to know where you can go and where you can't go, particularly when you know that visibility could disappear, as it really did. Totally.
Those guys didn't know. They couldn't help it, They were sent in the middle of the bloody nowhere. It was coming dark, and
I think it's very difficult for external crews.
They don't know the lay of the land, and then they're just following orders.
And they're not used to our areas. I felt sorry for them, really, because they didn't seem to know what was going on in a strange area. You can't really blame them for it. It's the orders that they get are half the trouble too.
And I thought, surely they know what they're doing. But no, they didn't know. Nobody knew. They were going and waiting, and well, that's why people got frustrated and angry and still angry.
But we went to meetings up here and in Bonang, and the local people, they sort of couldn't do anything because they'd sent the people from Melbourne that knew nothing about the area.
After the fire and the very clear glaring problems that we could all see, and also a growing standoff between departmental staff and community, which was not good at all. Our concern that they could have put the fire out, and then some people told them that very bluntly at meetings, and their defensiveness, we didn't have a good dynamic going at all.
I think we all felt we were just ignored. We made really good points, and we're people who've lived here most of our lives, if not all of our lives.
So when the authorities took over from Melbourne and the local people had no say, it was just useless. And I suppose I just lost interest then. All the meetings in the world is not going to fix that, I don't think. Not while they've got that authority over the local people. Because the local people be in there and help you no end.
Quite a few community members were very angry, and I think, it was a bit threatening for some of the officials, but that, I think, was expected.
They seem to have missed a great big slab of life and life experiences. What on earth would they expect? A community that had been completely deserted, and we were going to be happy and offer them tea and scones?
Yeah, it is very confronting, but we also understand that people have been impacted. Your own livelihood's been impacted, and then you're going to talk to other people that have had, have impacts. So it can be confronting, but we do the best we can at those times. We try not to shy away from that, and at times there's some difficult conversations.
I think the trouble is with a lot of those things the government put out, this must cost them a fortune, but it's not put down in simple terms that everyday person understands. Well, I haven't got time to read it anyway. I've got to do my garden and cook and clean, and I mean, if you could just 2 pages, you could read it and say, oh yeah, I understand that, but when you get something with a lot of, as I said, a bureaucratic dribble, well, what's good of it to any of us? Whether you're in the city or the bush or wherever you are.
We didn't want to put any more energy into it. We just had our farm and our life we wanted to carry on with it, rather than having another day away.
We do the day, we come home, we have dinner, we go to bed, we get up in the morning, we go there, we do the things that we have to do, we come home, we have dinner, we go to bed, and that, for 6 months it was going without taking a breath.
And we were desperate for information too, I might add.
I rang every day and said, what are you doing? And I was told time and time again that on their modelling said that we were not going to be burnt, etc., etc.
The communication is always difficult, although I suspect communication is always blamed afterwards, because you simply can't have all the information.
No one from the CFA communicated with myself and my husband. So when I heard that somebody, heard that I was frustrated, that we weren't put in the loop, I immediately felt a bit more supported then. Didn't feel supported up to then, to be honest.
We were finding out more from social media than what we were after anybody else.
And that's the bit that comes out at the end of all of these reviews, that people didn't know what was happening, or it should have been better communicated both before and after.
Tina down the road did a lot of communications, and she was probably the best person for me to get in contact with. And that was entirely, to my knowledge, volunteer, and she seemed to be doing it all day, every day, which was incredible to be able to do that. And I mean, so emotionally draining for her to be getting phone calls all the time going, do you know if Josh is alive? And I don't know however many other people were ringing and going, do you know like which end of the valley is getting hit now, and who's surviving and what houses are gone?
Friday, 4:56 p.m. I'm unsure about what's going on. Call me back if Julian, bye. Friday, 10:26 p.m.
This is a bushfire advice message issued by CFA for the residents of Goongerra and Bonang and surrounding areas. The fire is 4 kilometres west of Bonang Road. The fire could impact the area between Goongerra and Bonang tomorrow. You are advised to stay informed.
Friday, 5:44 p.m.
Sean Lowell, Flinny. Now, from Jamie's place, it's sort of on top of Mount Jersey. It's a little bit coming this way, but it's running down a ridge or gully that's running towards your end of town, sort of thing.
Hi, yes, Greg. I'm in the truck. I'm just wondering what's going on. Is it going up or not? I don't know what's going on.
70 days of stress, your life on pause, worrying about, your family and your friends. And
Sunday, 7:03 a.m.
Hey, darling. I just want you to come down to Orbost now on your bike or whatever, or the car, and just get out of there, alright? That steady fire in the snowy is all joined up, and it's 26,000 hectares, and it's going to be windy as fuck today, so we want you here, darling. Come on.
Sunday, 9:55 a.m.
The residents in the Goongerra area should leave now.
Resident Sean, hoping you're okay. Good luck, mate. Everything's going okay down here. The plane's gone past us, so yeah, we're still standing. So good luck, mate.
Emergency. Emergency. This is a bushfire emergency warning message issued by the CFA. The residents in the Goongerra area should leave now.
Hey, Sean, I can smell paint burning, Just checking you're alright up there, I'll try that on. Right.
End of messages.
During the height of the fire, they didn't know where their loved ones were.
Friends and family ringing from interstate, hearing all sorts of crazy stories that just weren't at all real, and often escalating situations. Even my father at one stage got a phone call telling him that I was dead.
Fragmented bits of information and, you know, phone calls of like hearing that Sean had just rode up the road through a wall of flames.
And he asked me where Philip was, and I said, well, Philip is there at the property. And he said, well, I hope he's all right because there's a lot of smoke and flames here and I hope he's safe. And I said, well, I certainly hope so.
People don't really realise what you go through. You know, you're constantly concerned about, you don't know what's going to be 6 months down the track because you don't know if you're going to have your house here, you know, or your animals and your partner. And so, yeah, it's just people, yeah, unless you're in our shoes or whoever's shoes in their experience, you just don't know.
Being unsure as to what life is going, what expectations are fair to have for the future, because you're going months of going, will I have a house, won't I have a house, will I go back there, won't I go back there.
It's a mournful feeling when you come back and, you know, your shed's hanging in, the water tank was hanging upside down, and you just think, truth, where do you start, you know?
We have lost 6 precious weeks of lost production on the property. Neighbours have been burnt out, total devastation. But no rest for the locals. We are still preparing for the worst.
I knew before the fire came that we were going to get burnt quite badly, and we did, even though we'd done everything we could to alleviate the result.
Some people lost a lot.
Like Philip and Tricia, they lost absolutely everything off their farm, and they lost 120 sheep.
Well, we lost all our machinery, our sheds, our caravan, our big shed, all our fencing.
Me and my ex-partner Rob were living in a property at Martins Creek, which burnt down in the fires.
So really scary taste for us, I guess, for that displacement and for what it is for people who do lose their homes. And a few people did lose their homes in these fires, and some of them were really good friends of ours. There was 2 couples, and unfortunately neither of them of those couples are here now.
People in the valley that had children that had to go live somewhere else and go to another school, and it's definitely life-changing.
I tell you, I lost so much that I no longer even, it's such a venting thing that you just keep rambling.
And sometimes you get the feeling you get treated like a mental case. And you know you're not. But you feel like saying, for God's sake, why can't you understand what I'm feeling? It's so simple. You lost something that you worked all your life for, and you're grieving. Why can't you understand that?
We felt devastated because we'd actually been striving since we arrived in 1972 to preserve this area.
Very sad as well to watch so much destruction happen.
I was horrified what could have happened to the valley, and that when I saw all the devastation, I was in tears by the time I got up there.
There was only one time I remember that I was actually really affected by it, and that was over the back here. The fire was quite close. It was an afternoon. Maybe the fire front was kilometres away, but I could hear the sound. I could see the back of the forest there glowing red. I could hear the sound, and I remember having a hose, just a little garden hose, and I was thinking, right, this is going to be about as bad as it's going to get. And I remember dropping the hose and trying to get on the radio and find out about it, and I couldn't get no communication, couldn't get any idea, and I can still remember that feeling to this day, total helplessness.
Getting those phone calls, the emergency evacuate phone calls, just answer and they'd be like, ree, ree. It was so scary, and like being evacuated a few times.
The signal kept changing whether or not it was dangerous to be home or not dangerous, so I had to keep driving back and forth.
and you don't know what's out there and how far away it is, and I just couldn't relax.
And I was really worried about Andy because he had a heart condition and he was quite unwell at the time, and he's running up and down and just putting out fires, and trees are falling down, and I don't know if he's been killed by a tree. And
yeah, I don't think we took it as seriously as it turned out to be.
It probably took 6-8 weeks afterwards for not to be tired, physically, emotionally tired. And I don't know if because the stress and the trauma and lack of sleep during the fires was some of the issue, or some of it was just the smoke, that your body wouldn't function properly because of the smoke inhalation.
There are a lot of occasions where it was so smoky that I wouldn't be able to see you from here. So I wore a respirator for quite a long time, and especially at nights.
As it went on, it kind of, at the start, the smell of smoke was terrifying, but by the end, you'd look out and, can I see flames, within 100 metres? That became dire rather than the smoke was the scary bit at the start.
How I got through it really was already being a little bit kind of hardened around the edges in relation to grief. And also my job at the neighbourhood house meant that I took a sort of a not me, them outlook. I was more worried about other people and how they were coping.
So I think I was concentrating on other things. That's why it was after the fires where things would get to me. We had wildlife here that we had to keep looking after just because there was a fire on. The wallabies still needed to get their milk, that we had orphan wallabies and we had wombats.
Yeah, I think I just had to not think about a lot of stuff and just... But I think it was much later that I had my massive meltdown.
Yeah, and for me, I could just switch off and fulfil a role. Because like I said, I was working with the CFA at the time, so every day I just put on the uniform and did my thing.
The level of involvement in terms of a command position sort of thing does help in terms of you can kind of set your own emotions or something or other behind and you do the job.
Having been through bushfires before, I probably wasn't as panicked as a lot of people because I knew what to expect.
There was moments where it was exciting, fun, scary, sad, emotionally diverse, I guess, much like life is generally.
Yeah, it was just everyone was running on adrenaline and just exhausted and, manic, sad, happy, every emotion in every day. It was bizarre.
Sometimes, adrenaline can kind of overcome us a little bit and we can get a bit excited and all that kind of stuff.
The whole environment of what was happening at the time, something where I could excel, I suppose. I just felt very comfortable the whole time. And to me, it was very exciting and spectacular. It's probably a good word.
Sure, there was some stressful times, but I don't think I'm carrying anything over from the time because I knew what was going on. And I think when you don't know, that's the problem, that your mind starts to fill in the blanks. And of course, we all know what happens when our mind runs wild.
I mean, family's so important because they know you and they can see you. Whereas, the Shire, the state government, all these groups and organisations, well, they don't really know you and they don't see you every day. So how to put strategies into place for that, I don't know.
I know as a department we're working very, very hard to put the community at the centre of everything we do. And fires tend to help bring communities together, but in saying that, some people, really have some serious impacts on their own livelihoods, and we try to work with those people after the event as well.
I don't know, anyone who says to me that they don't have any issues post-fire is totally full of shit. Yeah, there's something down there. Whether they're like, oh no, it was fine, it was, I'm chill about it, whatever, no. There's something in there.
The fire and your response to it, it isn't like an isolated thing. The people haven't just not existed and then the fire happens and they're like a blank canvas,
you have all that other stuff going on in your life before and after.
We all have a prior life too, so the fires are often just something on top of difficulties one might have in life, of trauma people have experienced in their childhood. So it adds. Each trauma on top of this has a bigger effect on your psyche, on your day-to-day experience. After living through an existential trauma like fear of death generally is, if you feel like you're getting burned out, just smelling smoke in the landscape, even if it's a controlled fire, they automatically get nervous.
I was in the house and someone must have lit something up next door, and this smoke just started just rushing in the front door, and I just, shit, like ran outside and was, you know, doing these ones like, what's going on, trying to work out where it's coming from. It's just like those funny little triggers still come up.
I still can't handle wind. I go, you know, when you get that really high wind, and my adrenaline will come up, but then I think, it's okay, it's just the wind, because you have that memory. You won't lose it.
As you can see, it's very dry now too, a bit like it was when the fire went through, which is unusual for Goonda this time of the year to be so dry.
This is home, the whole community, the whole landscape, the people, it's home. Maybe it took that to make us realise how lucky we were to have our community.
The strong connection, the relationships that we made, I want to see them continue and not be existent only because something tragic happened and brought us together.
I feel that communities are one community when they're all facing the same catastrophe, and for that moment I do think we acted like that.
It's a nice thing to realise you're part of a community and you help each other out as best you can, and you're really only interested in making sure everybody's safe. And
oh yeah, it brings you tight together when there's a fire incident, and whoever's left, it's a really tight group, and you're keeping an eye out for each other. And
all the close houses, they all come up and all got together, and and that's really good.
We used to have dinners at different places because people lost their freezers and things, so the food had to be eaten.
Yeah, all getting together and eating together, and at times having helicopter trips bringing up all sorts of delicious meals for us.
A lot of the assistance was really good. Like there was a big drop of, round bales of hay that you could go and get if you had animals to feed.
And certainly the support of a community is one of the biggest things, and being in isolation in an area without a community would be really terrifying. To know that there is nobody thinking of you, whereas here, where we are in Goonda, we're really lucky that there's other people around who are prepared to take on volunteer roles, that are to support the people around them and to try and keep a community existing.
I was also trying to help out with those fires as well. I think you're sort of like, it's happening all around you, so you want to be part of the solution.
We were together, this ended up as some sort of base camp, so we were all sleeping together, eating together, and that just helped. It really, really helped. People you may not have known so well, you got to know a lot better. You saw a lot of personality changes when they were faced with fear, and that was interesting.
Yeah, any neighbourly disputes and whatever, it all just goes to the side, and it's all just about helping, and that's what I really admire about a lot of the people in this community.
Community spirit was skyrocketing. It was really, really great. So that was a really nice, supportive feeling.
I remember one night a friend walking in, and I knew him quite well, but he walked in and his family had left, and he just looked distraught. And I said, "Mate, are you okay?" And he was just like, no, and teared up, and everyone was exhausted because they weren't sleeping, and gave him a hug, and he just said, "Can I please stay here with everyone tonight?"
That support of community members and family and friends just so helped me through it, and I think helped all of us through it. I was really impressed by that. It's created a bond in our relationships out here that just won't be broken, I don't think.
India wrote a poem, and then I heard that Sean was with a bunch of, the other locals, probably down at Sharon's place, and he's got his delivery, and he's opened up the letter and he's read it out loud. This is what Sharon told me, and she said there wasn't a dry eye left in the room after you read out the poem that you wrote to your dad.
Definitely not.
So I wrote this when I was 13, so don't...
Doing a great job.
Well, I can't lie that we're living it hard here in Goongerah. Just take a look at our yard. It's burnt and crispy like it's been in an oven, but I don't care, it's my dad I'm loving. You saved our beautiful house, I love you so. You are brave and even took a video to show. Now I can't wait till I see you again. You're not just my dad, but you're my best friend. You are incredible, being awesome is what you do. What more can I say? I love you.
I love that.
Yeah.
It just went from, like, once, the fire was under control or whatever, it went from just so much going on to, like, nothing.
And I guess we were so long together.
Yeah.
Like, it was close to 5 weeks. And, with people that you're closest to, and you'd all shared this, and then it was over, and you had to get back to your lives, and you missed it, you missed being with everyone.
I think because you were kind of like, on edge for such a prolonged period of time, there was quite a big crash afterwards, and it took me a while for me personally, to actually recognise that.
You can only sort of put stress away for so long, I find.
But at the time, I really enjoyed it. It was maybe a year later when I started having symptoms of like anxiety and stress and fear, and the hot northerlies would come in and I'd be like freaking out. And
I don't really know, but maybe it's after the fires. And she said, "But that was a year ago." And I said, "Yeah, I know, but I still think there's stuff going on." I couldn't tell you what it was. And I think for a lot of people it's still 3 years later, and maybe we don't recognise it as that. But there's still stuff going on.
ABC Radio wanted to interview me about it, and I actually broke down in tears. I mean, it was quite out of the blue, but just snuck up and grabbed me. And that was a year or two later.
Yeah, I couldn't articulate why it's still a problem.
It feels kind of bad that it still is. I feel bad. I feel a bit guilty that it still affects us.
Yeah, you do, because nothing bad happened really, because we're all still here.
Yeah, no one died, but...
But it affects you.
I don't know what happened, but I know that at the end of whatever happened here, I'll never be the same.
There's still such a stigma around depression and mental health, as much as we kind of pretend there isn't. And I think most people are guilty of it. I know I certainly am. You don't want to... it's just hard to see things for what they are in reality. You kind of turn the other cheek or whatever. Or go, yeah, I'll be right.
I find it a bit hard to call it post-traumatic stress, because in my mind that's like for people that have gone to war or like something really intense. But that's the only thing I can come down to trying to explain it.
It was such a different headspace. It was all complete adrenaline, stress, anxiety, and then I think a week or two after it finished, I had to go back into uni straight away. And I turned up to my first class and I couldn't even go, and I just called Mum like, I can't do this. Like, I've just been through this few months or whatever of just weeks of complete stress, and she's like, well, go straight away and see a counsellor. So I just walked into the uni person crying, couldn't even talk, and I sat down and they're like, what's going on? And I just went, like, I tried to say the word, my house been in, we were in fires, and I just couldn't even talk for a whole hour. I just cried.
I'm angry. I'm in pain, and there's nothing that you can do that can take that away. So let me grieve in peace, and then when I'm ready, come out and help. And if you really want to help, then come in the paddock with me and help us put this fence together.
It is a feeling of being abandoned by every form of government and every organisation. You can't have that happen without feeling anger. So it's cut fairly deep.
You know, we do need to look after the community post an event for sure.
I remember at the time feeling and saying, I think on radio, that we felt forgotten and that people, didn't understand what we were going through. But since then I've thought, well, of course they didn't know, because unless you're there, you don't know.
When traumatic stuff happens, you can't predict how you're going to react.
You learn a lot from it.
Yes. To rely more on yourselves.
And yeah,
to plan it better.
And be stronger in yourself on what you feel should happen and what to do. And not let other people, other departments, other outsiders influence your decisions.
That in the end we have to make ourselves fireproof, more resilient, more reliant on each other, improve our communication within the valley.
If you like the area, you just adapt to the way you live in that area.
To shift to a remote area like Goongerah and anywhere in far East Gippsland out here is you need to have a certain amount of resilience. So if you don't, you develop that. And that you do want to escape just the madness of the city and just the corporate capitalism.
There's people like us that like living a little bit on the edge or away from larger communities.
Have to hope that people still want to live here. That's one of our, we always lose people after a fire. And there's not those people moving back in. So where does that vitality that makes a community attractive and looks after people to come from? And it'll be a bit reliant on institutions like schools, they're a community in itself, and the neighbourhood house. And the people who fund them, the Shire, Orbost Regional Health, working together, but working from what we want and need rather than from what they think we should have.
There is a future for communities in the bush, in more isolated places. Because they're special places to live. It's just wonderful.
I think it's a great future up here. It's a beautiful area. We love the forest when they regenerate. When the wildlife finally comes back, if it hasn't done too much damage for decades to come.
Given that this is a wilderness area, I just think how strange that we'd have a wilderness area because it's got such a wonderful diverse habitat and wildlife, but then we don't even check what's gone. We don't even know what was there. We don't know what's gone. And we don't know how to help it.
And it basically goes right back to European settlement. Australians do not understand the environment they live. If you put all the ministers for environment together and I took them out in the bush, I could lose them in the botanical gardens.
They understand how fire might burn. They don't understand the different vegetation classes. They don't understand, that there are some wetter areas, the southern slopes, the gullies. They're not a threat. Rainforest not a threat. Wet forest isn't a threat so much. I think there needs to be a lot more ecological expertise put in it.
those lightning fires, once upon a time, they just would have burnt. They would have burnt until they ran out of fuel or the weather changed or both. And so the bush was very different back then, basically before whitefellas.
When Aboriginals talk about the bond they had with land, that is describing the responsibility each and every one had with land. The Aborigines managed for at least 50,000 years to have a biodiversity-rich continent, and we're wiping them out flat out. And don't point the finger at bloody farmers. I've got all the protected species here. In fact, after it burns, what's left comes here.
I watered a fair bit of ground and got a bit of grass going again, and I only had the only green bit of grass around, so I had all the kangaroos and my neighbours' sheep and everything, all wanting a feed.
I feel the more understanding people have of Australian native bush and how it'll burn and basically how we've got to look after it and manage it, is going to help us into the future.
Yeah, it's going to continue to be a beautiful area if it's given a chance, and if we're given a chance to regenerate like the bush.
We are battlers. We know how to survive in tough time. Our family are 5th and 6th generation residents.
I mean, I love it here. It's just such an amazing place to live. It's quiet. It's just incredible.
The reason why I live here is because I really like the environment here.
Oh, it's beautiful. I love it. There's nothing better than living in paradise.
We have our good friends here, we ride motorbikes and grow food and manage the land and just try and make it better for the next person that comes along. There's a lot of freedom out here and to be autonomous and to do your thing, so you've got everything out here except people breathing down your neck, so...
That's about all that keeps me going. I love the bush and riding around the mountains sort of thing.
And that's probably the thing that's probably kept me, because I love animals. That's what's actually had me stay in some ways. I don't have any, I actually love them.
I love farming, I love the animals. I said to Patricia, I've forgotten the words now, that say that not so much that we're starting again, we're just going to keep going.
And just trying to look at the fact that everyone's going through the same thing.
We are really all in the same boat. We're absolutely in the same boat. And it's not just in relation to nature, whatever it's going to throw at us again. We do know, everyone in this community already knew that we're fire prone. Climate change and the impact of this fire and the fuel it's created make it inevitable that we'll have another fire.
Well, I just think all we can do is help one another as much as we can, because we're going to need our neighbours more.
We've always been community-minded out here, and we've got a lot of groups that branch out outside of the region that we're connected to. But I feel like this is going to push us and motivate us a lot more, that, it is worth putting your voice out there. It is worth having these conversations with people, even though sometimes you feel like they've just come out to consult you or whatever. It's worth getting together and talking as a community and putting your voice out there going, no, this is what we want. Like, you can't just forget about the 10% rural people because they're out in the middle of the sticks.
It's an isolated area, but it doesn't have to be isolated people. So the people being engaged in some form of community is going to help them be more resilient. But to have a focus in each community that gives it a character and a personality, so that there's something unique about it, is going to build a resilience that the outside world can identify. Because at the moment I think there's a massive deterioration, and the lower the numbers become, the harder it is for community to exist.
I think the more we do this, and the smarter we get at it, the more we'll work with communities, and the communities will work with us to get better outcomes.
Yeah, it was what it was. There was heaps of fires everywhere. I was happy that I had a house and we were all alive.
And I think that's probably something that should be recognised from the fact that we're still here is because our house survived the fire and that's very much chance.
And there's times where you sort of think, like this summer when it's hot and dry and you think, oh, it could burn again. You think, oh, what can you do? And what I did is I start watering. I do my fire preparedness so then I can think, oh, it's okay. I've got this sorted.
They're natural disasters and some bits could have been handled better, some bits were handled well. Shit happens.
The best thing that humans have got is that we're so adaptable, and we are going to adapt. And all these things will show us how. And these are big learnings.
There's a term that's used in the professional community which is called post-traumatic growth. And it refers to positive personal changes which can come about in people who have experienced trauma. People don't want to be seen as having a mental illness, but everyone needs to talk. Narrative therapy gave them that avenue that they could feel heard and they could feel validated that their story is important. That was one of the main complaints community members had. No one ever asked us how we are. No one ever asked us how we felt and how we coped with it. I think that maybe it'll help people get a sense of achievement and maybe for some closure or create a start of a healing process. It might even be beneficial for the communities at large in the end to create an amount of acceptance and saying, hey, yeah, you might be different, but you're also the same. Their stories are important. People want to know and people want to listen, and I think that's a great gift.
A lot went on. It was full on for everyone, and I think it'll be really great for everyone to, you know, listen to other people's experience and feel validated.
We might not think we're affected, but we are.
Yeah. And definitely it helps talking about it because, you know, if you don't talk about it, it doesn't mean it's not there, or if you're not thinking about it every day, it's buried somewhere in there.
I think having sympathy is and compassion is normal, but I think I'd want people to see the strength that has made these people, the strength that they feel after they've gone through this traumatic experience and come out of it and are still surviving, and I think that's pretty cool.
Friday, 7:29 p.m.
Sean Lowell, flitting from Jamie's place. All the smoke is being driven south, and the sunset is going to be totally and utterly amazing.
Yeah, so that's the fire story. Yes. Right. Let's go.
Over and out.
Alright, I've got to start a pump and squirt water. So far so good. Happy days.
Water is a good antidote to fire.
Well, I started this song back in December. It was the 5th, actually. I was at home, the December before the fires, right? I was at home and I was pulling the garlic for their new crop, and I could feel the earth was drier than I'd ever felt it. It was a stinking hot day and I was really tired. So I went in about 3 and had a rest, and this is what came out. But then I didn't want to finish it because it freaked me out. And the chorus will be obvious why. So. Start here
and that it is a traveling affair, and it's never prearranged. We can't always change. We feel the change is stirring in the wind, and you know it's stirring from within, 'cause you know the winds of change. Yeah, the winds of change are coming. Those winds are on their way. They're gonna bring a new beginning. They're gonna bring a brand new way. Gonna rain, rain, hope. So let the rain of hope soak